Is Ukraine's fate truly determined by dramatic offensives and quick victories, or is the real turning point taking place quietly, in the shadows, one slow, remorseless step at a time? To understand this, we must look closely at the evolving front lines. Over the past few weeks, Russian forces have advanced not through spectacular surges, but by patient, methodical movements. In urban districts and the sprawling industrial zones, once proud bastions of Ukrainian defense, positions have slipped away, one by one, under a steady pressure that rarely draws global headlines. This is not just a matter of lost ground. As the map shrinks for Ukraine, the strain on its troops is becoming painfully clear. Morale dips as defensive lines buckle, and the psychological toll weighs heavily. Strategic hubs like Kupiansk, once celebrated in triumphant tones, now receive only muted mention from Ukrainian officials. This omission, in itself, speaks volumes, sometimes saying nothing is more telling than any battlefield report. Confidence, like territory, can be lost in increments. Both analysts and soldiers on the ground sense a grim shift. The most serious phase of the conflict in 2025 may have already begun. There are no lightning storms or dramatic reversals here, just the grinding attrition that narrows Ukrainian choices, slice by slice. Each foot gained by Russian units further constricts Ukrainian logistics, threatening to sever the lifelines that sustain their defense. Consider the historical precedent of the First World War's Western Front, where months of static trench warfare saw territory shift by only a few yards after massive losses. The war's outcome was not decided by a single battle, but by the slow exhaustion of resources and morale. Ukraine's current plight echoes this painful pattern. Progress is measured in meters, but the consequences are measured in generations. To focus only on headline clashes is to miss the deeper peril. Wars of attrition rarely announce their decisive moments. Rather, their effects linger long after the last shot is fired. The real risk is failing to recognize the tightening noose until it has already closed. In this silent contest of endurance, the stakes for Ukraine, and for an entire continent, rise with each incremental advance. But what does this grinding reality mean for the diplomatic front? While battlefields shift, efforts to reach a negotiated settlement remain fraught with uncertainty and distrust. History is filled with wars, such as the Korean conflict, that became frozen stalemates, their lines hardening into new borders that shaped the world for decades. The danger is that the Ukraine war, too, will solidify into a protracted, unresolved crisis. Forget every old assumption. This war is not about capturing city squares for glory. It is being fought over the lifelines that keep armies moving, supply lines, railways, and depots. This is a war of logistics, more reminiscent of the grueling supply battles of the Second World War than the swift campaigns of recent decades. Beneath the headlines of dramatic assaults and missile strikes, the real contest in Ukraine is unfolding inch by inch. Russian forces are advancing methodically, not chasing flashy victories, but targeting key urban and industrial corridors. Consider the recent capture of critical assets such as the automotive college and the sprawling metalworks plant. In the north, towns like Sinelnikovo are witnessing slow, deliberate moves, each step forward marked by the seizure of new positions and the slow, systematic clearing of Ukrainian resistance. These incremental movements may appear insignificant from a distance, but each one carves deeper into Ukraine's defensive web. In Sinelnikovo, for example, Russian troops captured a woodworking facility and are now systematically rooting out Ukrainian defenders from nearby forests. Kupiansk, once hailed by Ukraine as a vital stronghold, is now being publicly downplayed by Ukrainian officials. This rhetorical pivot is more than just spin. It reflects a mounting struggle to hold ground that, until recently, was deemed essential for survival. On the left bank of Volchansk, Russian units have not only entrenched themselves, but pushed onward, seizing assets like an oil processing plant. The fighting in this area is fierce, especially near railway stations and in dense woodland, where small unit clashes and ambushes have become daily realities. Each Russian advance is less about grabbing headlines than about choking Ukraine's logistics. Roads, rails, and warehouses, the arteries of any modern army, are steadily being cut off. For Ukraine, the challenge now is not simply retaining territory, but keeping ammunition, food, and reinforcements flowing to frontline units. Each lost warehouse or captured rail junction tightens the vice on already stretched supply lines. Ukrainian officials strive to reassure the public, offering calm words to counter grim news. But the truth on the ground is starker. Russia is tightening its grip in Sinelnikovo and Kupiansk, placing ever greater strain on Ukraine's ability to regroup and resupply. Consider the practical example of the Second World War's Battle of Stalingrad, where control of a single railway station determined the fate of entire armies. In Ukraine, a similar logic applies. Each logistical hub lost is a blow to the nation's ability to resist. The ongoing battles in the forests and along the left bank of Volchansk illustrate the war's shift toward attrition, where the focus is not on spectacular victories, but on slow, methodical isolation. Russian forces are advancing with relentless focus on logistics-heavy targets. Misreading the evolving front risks missing how close certain sectors are to collapse. Both armies now fight for every railway, every crossroads, fully aware that the outcome may depend not on who seizes a city first, but on who keeps the arteries of war open while the others close. Yet as logistics bleed and towns change hands, outside pressure for a diplomatic breakthrough is growing. Peace, however, remains elusive. The next phase will not only test armies, but also the stamina and resolve of entire nations. The international community, having watched protracted conflicts in places like Korea and Cyprus, should know how difficult it is to forge lasting peace when both sides are exhausted. This is not just a battle of firepower. It is a contest of endurance, willpower, and dwindling supplies. The heart of the struggle lies far from the front lines, hidden in the constant maneuvers for fuel, ammunition, and every able-bodied soldier. The logistics tail is now the lifeline. Every convoy that reaches the front, every trainload of shells, every repaired bridge can make the difference between survival and collapse. On the ground, Russian forces are waging a slow, deliberate campaign of attrition. Their focus is not on sweeping advances, but on eroding Ukraine's fighting capacity piece by piece. By targeting roads, supply depots, and lifelines, Russia aims to strangle Ukraine's logistics, forcing defenders into a frantic race for resources and reinforcements. The cost is mounting. In the Zaporizhzhia and Donetsk regions, reports highlight a steady rise in Ukrainian casualties and battered defensive lines. Each week brings word of fresh gaps in the front, hastily filled with whatever reserves remain. Though territory changes hands in small increments, the deeper objective is exhaustion, draining Ukraine's strength until resistance falters. For Ukraine's military, courage alone is not enough. Every day is a logistical gauntlet, moving shells under fire, patching weak sectors, and evacuating the wounded while Russian drones scan the landscape. Main supply routes are constantly targeted, and every warehouse or rail junction lost further unravels Ukraine's defensive web. Leadership is under immense pressure. Emergency reshuffles have installed new commanders, tasked with stabilizing collapsing fronts and rallying weary units. There are hurried counterattacks, public vows to regain the initiative, but behind closed doors, the strain is palpable. Every decision is a gamble between morale, manpower, and political risk. Without rapid replenishment, Ukraine's defenses risk unraveling. Neither side is willing to yield. Both armies are not only contesting today's ground, but preparing for a larger, potentially decisive clash. Officials whisper of looming offensives, possible encirclements, and battles that could redraw the map. The stakes are enormous. Ukraine faces a real danger of collapse if the drain outpaces support, while Russia risks overextension and internal cracks. Every meter gained or lost exacts a steep human and material price on both sides. As the war grinds on, the tension only grows. The next round of moves could tip the balance, not only for Ukraine and Russia, but for Europe's security and the fabric of global alliances. With so much hanging in the balance, the world holds its breath. Will exhausted armies seek compromise, or are even darker days ahead? The war's slow transformation is reshaping not only the battlefield, but the world's calculations about what comes next. As diplomatic talks stall and resources dwindle, the margin for error narrows. Consider the lessons of the Vietnam War. As American support wavered and supplies dwindled, South Vietnamese forces found themselves ever more isolated, leading to a sudden collapse that took many observers by surprise. While front lines bend and shift, an invisible struggle unfolds elsewhere, in shadowed back rooms and distant capitals. As Ukrainian soldiers entrench around Kharkiv and vital supply routes come under relentless attack, the fate of entire cities now hangs not only on bullets, but on whispered bargains and uneasy alliances. Military analysts warn of a chilling new scenario: the slow, methodical isolation of Kharkiv. Instead of launching a dramatic assault, Russian forces may tighten their grip with patience, cutting off roads, strangling supply chains, and waiting for defenders to weaken. Encirclement is not merely a military tactic. It is psychological warfare, casting over the city a grim dilemma: risk utter devastation, or accept surrender on harsh and humiliating terms. Even as the siege intensifies, diplomacy grinds to a halt. Recent attempts at negotiation, such as the widely discussed 12-point plan, have collapsed into mutual suspicion. Talks drag on, statements grow more ambiguous, and each side accuses the other of stonewalling. In the shadows, back-channel messages flicker, but with little sign of a true breakthrough. The atmosphere in Western capitals has shifted noticeably. Years of extraordinary support are giving way to fatigue. Some allies hesitate on new aid, question the long-term strategy, or even tentatively propose renewed dialogue, as pundits warn of a drawn-out, unwinnable war. The once solid unity is fraying, and with it, Ukraine's leverage at the negotiating table grows less certain by the day. Russia, meanwhile, appears content to wait. Its leaders seem to have abandoned the dream of swift victory in favor of slow attrition, wearing down opposition with sieges, incremental advances, and the relentless passage of time. This approach unsettles adversaries used to rapid results. The message is unmistakable. Russia believes that time itself is its greatest weapon, and it is prepared to outlast its foes as long as necessary. The stakes could not be higher. A single diplomatic misstep might freeze the conflict along new, artificial borders, leaving a festering wound in the heart of Europe for generations. Conversely, if Ukrainian defenses collapse suddenly, borders could be rewritten overnight, sending shockwaves far beyond the battlefield. Decisions made in these tense weeks will ripple through capitals and communities for decades to come. What are the practical lessons here, for both leaders and ordinary citizens? First, it is vital to recognize the importance of logistics in modern warfare. As seen in the Second World War's Eastern Front, the collapse of supply lines often spelled the end of entire armies. For Ukraine, keeping the flow of ammunition, food, and medical supplies is as crucial as holding the front lines. For citizens, supporting these efforts, whether by volunteering, fundraising, or simply staying informed, is a tangible way to contribute. Second, history shows that morale is a decisive factor. The fall of France in 1940 was not due solely to military inferiority, but to a collapse in national confidence and will. Ukrainian leaders must work tirelessly to maintain public trust and unity, even as setbacks occur. Citizens, too, play a role by resisting disinformation, supporting one another, and staying resilient in the face of adversity. Third, leaders must avoid the trap of denial and wishful thinking. When territory is lost, pretending it was never important only undermines credibility. Instead, honest communication, coupled with a realistic assessment of the situation, strengthens national resolve. The ability to adapt quickly to changing realities, by shifting resources, redeploying units, or rethinking strategy, can mean the difference between survival and defeat. Fourth, the international community must be wary of fatigue. Protracted wars, like the Soviet occupation of Afghanistan, have shown how external support can wane over time, leaving local forces vulnerable. Allies need to plan for the long haul, maintaining consistent support even when headlines fade. Diplomatic efforts should be sustained, not just in times of crisis, but as part of a long-term commitment to peace and stability. Fifth, investors and business leaders should monitor not only military news, but also political and economic shifts. The redrawing of borders, the imposition of sanctions, and the reconfiguration of supply chains can have profound effects on markets worldwide. Being proactive, by diversifying assets, hedging risks, and seeking reliable information, will be essential in navigating the uncertainty ahead. To understand how wars like this reshape the world, we must look beyond the headlines and into the deeper currents driving each move. The next chapter could change everything. Modern wars are not decided by lightning-fast conquests. They are won by outlasting, outmaneuvering, and outsupplying the enemy. Today, true victory depends less on dramatic advances and more on who can keep their fighters fed, equipped, and willing to press on. Numbers and flashy offensives may dominate headlines, but it is logistics, steady resupply, and morale that quietly decide the outcome. It is easy to be swept up by news of sudden breakthroughs or bold statements from leaders. Yet, real turning points usually unfold far from the spotlight. When fuel runs low, when vital supply routes are severed, or when exhaustion cripples entire battalions. What you see on a map or in official briefings is only half the story. The most perceptive analysts look elsewhere. They track where ammunition, medical supplies, and reinforcements flow. They listen for shifts in diplomatic language and read between the lines of closed-door meetings. Even the smallest changes, an unexpected convoy, a delayed announcement, can signal looming collapse or renewed resilience. Every military move is shaped by political calculations. Orders from generals often reflect not just battlefield needs, but the anxieties of politicians and the mood of the public. Sometimes, holding ground at any cost is less about strategy and more about saving national pride. This was seen in the later years of the First World War, when leaders hesitated to retreat from symbolic positions, leading to needless losses. Miss these quiet signals, and you risk being blindsided by sudden escalations or surprise peace deals. The war in Ukraine shows that patience and determination now outweigh brute force. As winter draws closer, each logistical choice, each test of resolve, will not only decide Ukraine's fate, but also the security and unity of Europe for years ahead. To illustrate, imagine a scenario where a key railway junction is lost, not with an explosion, but because a single bridge is destroyed by artillery and not repaired in time. Supplies dry up, morale drops, and within days, entire defensive lines can crumble. It is these invisible battles, of repair crews, of fuel convoys dodging drones, of medics working through the night, that often tip the balance. Russian advances and relentless pressure are forcing Ukrainian commanders into painful decisions. Each day, the front line grows more unpredictable, and the stakes for both sides rise. Soldiers now face not only physical exhaustion, but the psychological weight of uncertainty and mounting casualties. The lines on the map inch forward, but history itself is lurching. Can you sense the shift before it is recorded? This is not a war of spectacle or swift headlines. It is a test of endurance, nerves, and logistics. A slow crisis, tightening with each passing week. Russia's approach is patient, trading flashy gains for incremental advances and relentless pressure on Ukraine's vital supply routes. But the real danger extends beyond the front lines. If we focus only on explosions or dramatic images, we risk missing the deeper forces that are quietly redrawing borders, altering alliances, and rewriting the rules of power across Europe and beyond. For leaders, investors, and citizens, failing to track these shifts could mean missed opportunities, costly miscalculations, or even regional chaos spiraling out of control. Diplomacy remains at an impasse, leaving both sides trapped in a grueling contest that drains resources and tests national resolve. The true outcome will not hinge on a single battle, but on who can adapt, persist, and endure. A slow-motion struggle shaping the next chapter of history. As Ukraine's fate hangs in the balance, it falls to us all to watch closely and think critically. The coming moves may be quiet, but their impact will echo for years. Will you recognize a turning point as it unfolds, or only after it has changed the world? If history has taught us anything, it is that the decisive moments are rarely marked by grand declarations or dramatic offensives. They are often silent, creeping in through logistical collapse, diplomatic fatigue, or the quiet breaking of morale. As the war in Ukraine enters this most dangerous phase, the responsibility to see clearly, anticipate change, and learn from the past belongs to everyone, leaders and citizens alike. The question is not only whether Ukraine can endure, but whether the world is prepared to recognize that endurance, support it meaningfully, and draw the right lessons for the future. In the end, history will not only record the lines on the map, but the choices made in these weeks that shape them.